Welcome to In Conservation, the podcast of the Wildlife Trust for Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire. I'm Sophie Baker, editor of our members magazine Local Wildlife and host of the podcast. In today's episode, we're at Pitsford Water Nature Reserve in Northamptonshire with my colleague Mischa, and we were there to talk about moths. Perhaps they're a creature you haven't thought much about, or perhaps you're even frightened of them. But for such a small and generally hidden group of insects, largely, though not exclusively, fluttering about at night, they can tell us a surprising amount about the state of our countryside and how well we're doing managing our nature reserves, as well as about much bigger trends such as those caused by the climate crisis. At Pitsford, we've been monitoring the moths almost every day for over 25 years, and it was very exciting to be opening the moth trap with Mischa at the tail end of summer. Let's see what we found. It's a big green box. It's bigger than I imagined, I have to say.
Yep. So yeah, the moth trap, anything can be a moth trap really. So what we've got here, this was built by my predecessor's predecessor, I think, back in 1999. And it's basically a big cupboard made out of marine plywood with a light bulb on top with sort of clear perspex veins in an X shape. So that the moths are drawn to the light, and then they sort of fly into the perspex baffles, and then underneath there is a funnel into the cupboard, and then inside the cupboard we've got loads of eggs trays, which just give them lots of shelter. So basically mimics, they'll just settle down, find a little nook or a cranny to hide down in for the day, and then they sit there to see out the day until I come along and count them and turf them out really. And what we do then is we put them into the undergrowth so that they can find a safe space to settle down again for the day and go about their business the following day and carry on as normal. I'm Mischa. I'm the Senior Reserve Officer at Pitsford Water Nature Reserve. I've been here 14 years now, and I'm still discovering new things on the nature reserve. There's always something to discover. And yeah, since day one, I've been doing the moth traps. And I started the job not knowing a single moth. So, and now I can virtually identify any macro moth. We'll go into macro, I'm sure later, that comes into the moth trap. And yeah, it's a steep learning curve, but it was great fun.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, so I'm just checking around the outside of the trap. This one's a dark archers.
Got such fantastic names.
Oh, you wait. Yeah, there's one called a Chinese character, which we might see. They're really cool. They look like a piece of bird poo or a little drop of bird poo.
That's amazing.
But they look, apparently, according to the Victorians, look like they've got Chinese writing on their wings.
Ah, I see.
Hence the name. We've got Maiden's Blush. I don't even know why they called it that.
Yeah.
It's not going there. Bright Line Brown Eye, and then we've got the Brown Line Bright Eye.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, the names are really cool, and unlike a lot of common names for plants and that sort of thing, they're really quite well set in stone. So it doesn't matter what part of the country you go to, if you say I've got a dark archers, it will be a dark archers.
Right.
Whereas like with your plants, you say I've got a Jack by the hedge, and someone will go, oh, what's that? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's a good point actually.
Yeah, so you haven't got to bother with Latin names, which is good. So yeah, this is the dark archers, and you can see it just relies on camouflage for its defence. So it basically looks like a tree bark, and it will just settle on a tree.
Yeah.
It won't move all day, and just hopes that it's not discovered by a bird.
Yeah, and not just the colour, but the texture of tree bark as well.
Yeah,
isn't it? It's kind of you can see how it would totally blend in on a sort of textural Is it a specific tree, do you think? Do you know? Or is it
No,
just
I
in
think
general?
that just in general, yeah. So on that wooden post there, it would sort
Yeah.
of blend in. So what they sort of do is the markings sort of look like almost try and break up the outline. So so that it doesn't look like there's a shape there, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I have followed a moth that flew off. I think it was something like a willow beauty, which is a big flat grey moth, and it flew off, and I followed it, and it landed on a tree trunk, and it did this little shuffle, and then it sort of settled, and honestly it was like magic. It disappeared before my eyes, even though I didn't take my eyes off it. It's they're quite incredible.
Right. So you open the door.
Yeah, so kind of sometimes smells a bit like a rabbit hutch.
I'll prepare myself.
Yeah, and you'd get other stuff in here. Obviously you get all the moths, but other stuff are attracted to light. So flying insects, wasps, spiders. But this year's been particularly good for slugs in here because it's been wet. So it's not
really good year for slugs everywhere.
Yeah, it's not the most pleasant sometimes. But I can see some interesting moths already.
Oh, good.
So what I do is I sort of open it up because
what you've pulled out here is a paintbrush.
Yeah, you weren't expecting that, were you?
Not expecting that.
Yeah, so the paintbrush is in there to sweep out all the, because we're right next to the water, we get a lot of hatches of midges and caddisflies and that sort of thing. And so sometimes I've been into the trap on a particularly big hatch, and there's an inch deep of basically just midges all matted together. So yeah, the paintbrush is to sweep it out. Yeah, I didn't think to explain why I might have a paintbrush in there. It's just normal for me.
And it's got a few moths on, so it's obviously doing a good job.
So here we have a common rustic. This is one of your classic little brown jobs.
Yeah.
So the world of moths has little brown jobs as well as the birds. There's a whole range of brown moths that have this sort of, like the dark arches, quite a cryptic brown markings, so that they just camouflage themselves in amongst leaf litter or on a tree trunk or that sort of thing. And this one is a particularly annoying one to identify because it has about 10 variations.
Right.
And yeah, some of them look completely different to the other, so they're a tricky one to get your head around initially, but yeah, quite fun to see all the different variations.
It's about the size of a fingernail, I would say, isn't it, roughly?
Exactly that. Yeah,
and beautiful sort of russety brown colour, with some very delicate sort of white marks on them. Yeah, and stripy legs. I like a stripy leg.
Oh, there's some really good, hopefully we'll get some good ones that have got really stripy legs. Yeah,
very jazzy.
Yeah, there's some really cool ones with stripy legs. So this one, so you start to get to know the ones that will fly off. Is that just landed on?
Has it
gone down your t-shirt?
I don't know. I don't think it went down my t-shirt, but it was getting quite intimate.
Yeah, so you get to know the ones that are going to fly off, like that one, and they do generally just fly towards your face.
Yeah, which I guess is why some people feel frightened of moths.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally get that. Because most people don't see them in the state that we're witnessing them now. It's they come into your bedroom at night and they're buzzing around like maniacs around your light bulb, and yeah, some of them are quite big and make big thudding noises against your light bulb, which would be quite intimidating. But when you see them in the morning in a moth trap, they sit there, and this is the beauty of them over butterflies, is that they sit perfectly still, apart from the one that just flew in your face. Generally speaking, they will sit still. You can handle them, and I've heard them described as like little mice with wings, because they've got this cute fluffy furry body, and then there's these really delicate wings. And yeah, I have over the years converted a few people who didn't like moths, and by the end of the session they're stroking them going, oh, it's so cute. So yeah, creaky trap. So I'll bring out one of the egg trays. And so yeah, you can see they just sort of nestle into all the nooks and crannies of the egg trays.
They do. Oh, get that one before it flies off.
So that one was so that was a micro moth.
Yeah.
Which the micro moths and the macro moths is nothing to do with size. So we've got some micro moths that are bigger than the smallest macro moths, and vice versa. And yeah, it's more to do with where they fall on the taxonomic lineage sort of thing. Right. So it's the different families means if it's in a family of micro moths, then it's a micro moth regardless of what size it is.
Yeah.
I don't record the micro moths because they're a whole other ball game.
Something just landed on your sandal, and I don't know if that's a moth or a. Looks like it might. It's upside down on the floor there now.
Oh yeah, good spot. So it was scarce footman.
Literally on your foot. That's handy.
Yeah.
Is that where it got its name?
No. So I call them back swimmers because, as you see, this one's lying on its back and they just sort of like
play dead,
shuffle themselves along. So yeah, the footmen got their name from again the good old Victorian days, and apparently because they're sort of like a silvery grey, quite a clean grey colour with a orange outline, and apparently they look like footmen's coats from the when people had footmen. Wow. I don't know, I've never had a footman, so
there you go, but they tell a history, don't they?
Yeah,
that's the thing. That's the names still tell the history
of
it. Kind of, yeah, the culture.
So yeah,
where the name striking, isn't it?
It's got
from. Like you say, a very sleek sort of narrow. It's almost folded its wings round rather than holding them outstretched like you would kind of imagine a moth.
Yeah,
I suppose. It's sort of like a tubular with bright orange face.
Yeah, I always suggest people look at moths face on because looking at them face on gives you a whole other perspective, and they are incredibly cute face on.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's you've just pointed out the distinguishing feature of this. So there's a group of footmen. They all look superficially quite similar with the grey and the orange, but they're very different shapes. So this one I would say is rolled up like a cigar. I don't know why I say cigar. I don't smoke cigars, but like it's rolled up very tubular. Whereas there's another footman that's same coloration but is melon pip shaped. And there's another one that's very parallel sided, and that's sort of how you tell the difference between them. So yeah, it's not all about colour, it's about shape as well. And yeah, they all, so you kind of think of butterflies as like with the wings out, moths with their wings together, but as you can see they come in completely different sizes and shapes.
Yeah. How would you actually define a moth? What is a moth?
Oh, that's the killer question.
I bet. The natural world is never simple. I think that's the thing, right?
So there's a lot of myths about it's to do with the antennae. Moths have fluffy antennae, butterflies have clubbed antennae, and that's on the whole reasonably true in the UK. Except there are some moths with fluffy antennae, and hopefully we'll see some because they just look so cute. But a lot of them have thread-like antennae as well. And then when you look at it on a global scale, that just goes out the window. And then the day flying, night flying thing is not true. So the way I describe it, and I may be right, I may be wrong, some people might disagree, but it's more to do with where they fall on the taxonomic lineage sort of thing. So, and it's almost like it's split into three groups. So Lepidoptera, is split into three groups, and it's almost like it's to make it a bit more manageable. Right. So you've got the macro moths, which are these ones that we're looking at today, the micro moths, which is another group of moths, generally smaller, but not, as we've discussed, not always. And then you've got the butterflies as well. And I've just noticed this one here. This one is a cutie.
Oh yeah. Oh wow, that's very brave. On the nettles there, just goes straight in. Right, and it's holding its wings kind of upwards in a V shape. And a bright yellow, fluffy pom-pom like shoulders.
Pom-pom, yes, that's exactly what it is. And do you know what? You've kind of said what you've pointed out the features of what it gets its name from. It's called a canary shouldered thorn.
Wow.
So yeah, look at him face on.
That's amazing.
Just adorable.
Yeah, it's got beautiful grey. Almost looks like an owl, actually.
Yeah.
So like an eared owl.
Yeah. So these are the macro moths are sort of split into rough groups. Again, not just kind of loosely based on features. And so this is a group called the thorns, and they hold their wings much more like, almost more like butterflies, in that sort of upright position. And yeah, this one in particular has that gorgeous bright yellow furriness to it. And
yeah, it does.
yeah, you can definitely see the Victorians got that name right.
Absolutely.
Canary shouldered thorn. So,
yeah, beautiful.
very cute.
And just sitting so still on your finger as well.
Yeah, and
Like
see,
you're saying.
that's the joy of them. You know, there's no way you'd get a butterfly sitting on your hand like that.
Creaky door. I'm surprised it doesn't sort of alarm them. But I suppose they don't hear in the same way that we do. So it's not like if that was a thing full of mammals,
Yeah,
that creak would make your job very difficult.
yes. Yeah, there is the whole bat and moth arms race. And it is to do with hearing, but not, like you say, it's not in the same way that we hear. So bats obviously echolocate, and moths are their main food source, which I love bats, but yeah, they do eat a lot of my moths. But basically, the moths are coming, certain species of moth have developed a counter defense against the bat sonar. And I'm not sure if I've got the details 100% right, but some of them will actually emit sonar back, or some sort of noise back to confuse the moths. Some of them will detect the sonar and just drop out of the sky to evade the bats. Yeah, and I think there was another defence, but I'm not sure. I should have done my research before I spoke to you.
No, don't be silly. No, I think it's the diffusing the sound. Is that right? That's partly why they're furry, because they don't emit light. So when the sonar bounces off them, it bounces off in all sorts of different directions, rather than there being smooth. It would mean the sound bounced off cleanly. That's my understanding. Very much a layperson, podcast listeners. I am definitely not an expert, but I've been on enough bat punts, you see, to have picked up that little nugget of information from Ian Webb, our
so he's got the bat view of it, and it's absolutely fascinating. But yeah, I heard recently that there's a lot of bats going into care this year because they're struggling because there's no insects. And yeah, that's definitely evident in the moth traps. So our moth numbers are ridiculously low this year. There's not as many species as we normally get, and the numbers are much lower than what we would normally see. And that's where the beauty of having 25 years of data is. We can look back and you can sort of compare it to years where we had similar weather and see if it did similar things, and it is definitely going down. And it's just sort of superficially, I've noticed that normally on the moth traps there's bat poo and discarded wings, as brutal as it is, around the moth trap, because obviously it's a good feeding site for the bats, but there's hardly been any evidence of bats feeding around the traps this year at all, which is obviously good for the moths, but it's the knock-on effect. There's obviously not enough food for them.
Because as being largely kind of invisible to humans sort of insect, because we're not out at night, we can't see them at night, and all of that. And obviously there are some day flying, but the knock-on effect on other animals must be, they're such a food source, aren't they? For a huge number of animals, I would have thought.
So many, because obviously you've got your birds feed their young, the caterpillar, and things like your blue tits, they time their nesting to coincide with the big glut of caterpillars that come out in sort of springtime. And if that's skewed, because I think one of the problems with the climate change and everything is obviously the changes in weather and the extremes and that, but also the skewing of the seasons. So things are mistiming with the bud burst and the caterpillars, and yeah, that can have a big effect as well. And I remember one year when I did the nest boxes, it was a really poor year for caterpillars, and all the baby chicks had spiders' legs sticking out their mouths, and things like dragonflies, not dragonflies, sorry, daddy long legs. And that's not their normal food source, but they were obviously really struggling to find caterpillars, so they were just feeding their chicks on whatever they could find. And these poor things with these legs sticking out their mouths.
I mean, nature is very resilient, isn't it? in a lot of ways. But it's getting into smaller and smaller spaces, and that's why reserves like this are so important, I suppose. And like you say, 25 years worth of data is really quite an extraordinary achievement, really, isn't it? And it's not just it's directly comparative, because this moth trap is here permanently. I mean, it's kind of it's exactly the same place on the same reserve, doing the same job
365 days a year. I've got some wonderful volunteers who come out on Christmas morning to check the moth traps, because you still get moths flying through winter. We find that if temperatures need to be above about 4 degrees, and then we'll get moths in the trap, and you think, you hardy little souls. But
some of them have quite wintry names, don't they, if I remember correctly?
You've got December moth, November moth, which don't come out in November or December. They because of the seasons changing, November moth comes out, I think, October time, and December moth comes out November time.
Isn't that fascinating though, like the history of the change that we're all living through, actually in the naming of the species? Like, that's really that's amazing.
And there is a winter moth that flies through winter, and the winter moths are actually doing reasonably well. Their numbers are, well, certainly on our traps, seem to be increasing, as do sort of autumn species. The ones that are doing badly are the summer species, and it's not necessarily just because of the weather in summer, because you've got to remember their life cycle goes through the whole year. So the stage that they overwinter in is the most vulnerable. So if they overwinter as an egg, a caterpillar, or a pupa, or an adult, we get some that overwinter as adults. And I think one of the theories is that the milder, wetter winters are having the worst effect, because things get flooded, things go mouldy, or if things are overwintering as an adult, they're awake more, so they're using up energy. But obviously, there's no flowers to be able to replenish that energy. So it's there's so many variables to the whole thing. It's hard to pin down one thing that's causing the problems. I didn't show you what these are. So that's another footman.
Oh yes.
So that's
not as rolled up.
No, so that's the one that's shaped like a melon pip.
I see. Yes.
I don't like melons, so I don't know.
No, it's true. It is. I had a melon just the other day, or maybe like a squash pip, or
yeah. And then this one is called a Dunbar. When I'm teaching people how to identify it, I always say it looks like it's got a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle eye mask on.
And it does.
It
really does.
And then and then I forget, like, some of the people who are like younger than me probably don't know. Didn't grow up with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but
creaky door. Get more moths out.
So this one's cool. It's being a bit flighty. Come on, walk onto my hand. Here's me going, they sit really still. This one landed on your skirt.
Yes.
So
I keep still.
That's a coxcomb prominent, and it has a punk rocker hairdo.
It really does. And it looks like a coxcomb, which I suppose is to do with a cockerel, right? The comb of a cockerel.
Do you know what? I don't know. I don't know what a coxcomb is.
Like, the red bit on a cockerel.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
That makes sense. It's got a vertical sort of shape, that its wings are kind of folded up vertically, and a sort of knobbly shape. It's not a very good description, is it?
No, but you've hit the nail on the head again, why it's called a prominent. So it has those prominent humps along its back, so it sits much more tent-like than a lot of them are, so it's not as flat, and has those prominent features along its back, which I guess help again just break up the outline of the moth to help it sort of camouflage itself.
Yeah, and from the front, again, it's sort of deceptive. It sort of looks a lot bigger than it is. It's got big shoulders.
Yes.
Big old shoulders, and and stripy legs again.
Yes.
And it's got sort of furry elbows.
Yeah.
It's not a sentence I was expecting to say today.
Very cute.
They are. But there's a little bit of wind here, and it's like ruffling in the wind, like a little, kitten, like a little puppy. It's amazing.
Yeah, and then when you can sort of see, although it's generally quite brown, as you start to sort of, it catches the light and you see it clearly, so you can sort of see the intricacies in the markings. Yeah, there's no such thing as just a drab brown moth.
No. you have a favourite moth name?
Oh, favourite moth name? Possibly Peach Blossom, but only because I don't know if I should say this. I was talking about it to someone yesterday, and they thought it said Peach Bottom, so that's what it's forever going to be known now.
Yeah, otherwise it sounds like a sort of delicious dessert.
Yeah,
Kind, like
and it is. We probably won't get one because they're really declining on site for some reason. But it's just a plain brown moth with these beautiful peach circles on it that looks like sort of, I guess cherry blossom or peach blossom, just sort of petals just landed on it. It's beautiful. So that's probably my favourite name, I think. But then you've got names like the uncertain, the suspected, and the confused, which you can imagine.
Like me.
Yeah. And you can imagine they're just brown moths that are really quite tricky to identify.
Yeah.
Even the Victorians are like, I'm confused, I don't know.
They definitely had a sense of humour about it, didn't they?
And the beauty of identifying macro moths is you've not got to key them out like with things like beetles and that sort of thing. You've got to put them under a microscope and count hairs on their hind tarsi, and it's like learning a whole new language. Whereas with moths, you get to just look at lots of pretty pictures of moths and you go cover to cover and back again and go, oh yeah, I think it's that one. So yeah, they're a good gateway moth, a gateway creature into the world of invertebrates.
Is that what you love about them so much?
Yeah. I've dabbled in sort of beetle identification and ichneumon identification, and I'm just going to save those for my retirement when I've got a bit more time.
Yeah.
Moths are just so much more accessible. All you need is a light, basically. You can do it in your garden with hanging a white bed sheet, shining a bright torch on it, seeing what comes to it, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, it is very accessible, and I think people would be surprised about how much they find.
Yes.
I think, I think people probably think there's not a lot going on, but you put a moth trap out and you'd be pleasantly surprised.
Even in the most urban garden, you will get some really impressive moths.
You can see an impressive one on the other side of this one, like a little sneak preview.
So here we've got a hawk moth.
Woohoo!
So
I was looking forward to the potential of having a hawk moth.
Can I hold it?
Yeah, right, if that's all right.
Yeah, so this is a pine hawk moth.
Oh, I don't think I've ever seen a pine hawk moth.
And its markings look exactly like a Scots pine bark. So that goes on a Scots pine tree and again just disappears. What it doesn't have, like some hawk moths do, is on its hind wings. On this one, they're just brown.
Yeah.
But on some of the hawk moths, like the privet hawk moth, they have. Oh, it just got blown away.
Blew off my hand. Gust of wind.
Yeah, with some of the hawk moths, like the privet, they have warning colorations on the hind wing. So superficially on the surface, they blend in, and if that doesn't work, if a bird finds them, then they flash their hind wings and they've got these bright pink and black striped wings to sort of like, that's a warning coloration.
Wow.
Quite universally understood, I think, in the natural world. Red and black is poisonous, toxic, not edible, whatever. Whether they are or not, because there are some that mimic that coloration. So whether they are toxic or not, I don't know. Here's another one that's, this is called the ruby tiger, which is just bright red.
Yeah, just to say, this hawk moth is vibrating.
Yeah,
so vibrating its wings.
So what he's doing now is he's warming up. So he's like, I don't like it here. No offense to you, sitting on your hand.
None taken.
He's like, I'm not happy. I don't think I'm on a tree. I think I'm visible. So he's warming up his his flight muscles. So hopefully he might fly off, which is really quite impressive to see, because they're like, they almost look like sort of bats, dare I say it?
Yeah, no, they are. They are surprisingly big. I mean, just to say, the moths that we've been looking at, most of them have sort of been a couple of centimetres, or the size of a kind of fingernail or a thumbnail, impressive and very beautiful. But this hawk moth, I mean, you can see why people are impressed by them.
About bit thinner than my thumb.
A little bit thinner, but
about
the length, like my toddler's thumb is what I would say.
Yeah.
My 2-year-old's thumb is probably about the kind of, and width, of its body.
Yeah.
And an impressive wingspan. And, you can feel it on your hand much more than you can, you've got something there. It's amazing.
And so, yeah, he might fly off. But yeah, look at him face on. He's got his antennae out now, and you can see those big eyes.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you look at them, if you are mothing at night and you shine in a light, their eyes sort of glow orange.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
so they
reflect in the light.
Like looking for caimans in other countries, isn't it? That's how they have torches on the.
I'd rather look for moths than caiman.
Me too.
He's off.
Nearly hit you in the face.
Yeah. And this is what they do. They tend to fly around in a big circle and then just find a more natural resting spot. So yeah, you'd probably go and settle on those trees over there. But yeah, I mean, seeing it fly like that. I mean, I was on a bat walk the other night, and it doesn't look that much different to a bat flying, like scanning around. And that's a good one here. Yeah, so this is one of the most common moth, I think, UK wide. This is the large yellow underwing. Everyone will have seen these, whether they sort of know they have or not. If you've got a thick hedge in your garden or something like that, there'll be these in here.
I think there was one in my bedroom 2 days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
They don't look like, you wonder at the name when they're sitting still, because their wings are sort of folded flat and overlapping behind in a sort of I would say what people imagine a moth is.
Yes,
that's a sort of typical moth position.
Yeah,
but I bet that it's hiding a little secret under there.
Sure is. So yeah, superficially, classic brown moth, quite a big chunky moth, and you know about it when they fly in your face. I've had a few fly into my face, but yeah, when it does fly off, it's got this yellow flash. So yellow is another warning coloration in the natural world.
Yeah, like wasps.
And there it goes.
Yeah, bright yellow.
And you can see the yellow right as it flies into the canopy there. Still see that yellow.
Several metres in the air, and you can still see. Yeah,
that's it. What else did we have in here? So we've got some more of the footman. And then this one, there's a group of moths called the wainscots, which I think is some sort of woodwork. I'm not sure. But they're very straw-like. So if you imagine the sort of the strawy stems at the bottom of long grass, that's what a lot of their food plant is. That's where their larvae live. And if you look at the moth, you can see it would just disappear in amongst long strawy grass. They're sort of a sort of straw coloration. Yeah,
and even the stripes, sort of the vertical, like sort of from the head to their tail.
Yeah.
Yes, very straw-like.
And so this one, I think, is a smoky underwing. So with a lot of the wainscots, you check their hind wing to identify them. And the way to do that is just very gently get a pen or a pencil and just lift up the forewing, but you get one shot.
Yeah, just a little bit. I'll let you concentrate. Loom in with your pen.
One shot, and then it's like no. If you don't see it that time. So there you can sort of see, I would say, because my initial thoughts was a smoky wainscot, but actually looking at it, it's not very smoky on the hind wing. So I would actually say that's a common wainscot. So even after 14 years, they still trick me.
Yeah. And does the name, I mean, this is the problem as well with the naming conventions. There's a lot of things that have got common in the name really aren't anymore.
Yeah.
Is that true of that one, or is it actually more common?
I suppose it is common, but it's not as common as it used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I always say the garden tiger is the poster boy of moth decline, because for anyone who's sort of my age and older will know garden tigers were so common, and they've got cow print forewings, red and blue hind wings, and they're big and they're fluffy and they are adorable. And back when trapping started here in '99, we used to get 20-30 of it. 20 years before that, you'd get 50, 100. Now I jump out of my skin if I get one every 5 years or so.
It's It's almost hidden though, isn't it? It's sort of barely talked about.
Yeah,
you
and
know.
it's that shift in baseline as well. So for me, I've never known anything other than getting one every couple of years. So that's normal. So as I go on and they decline, I'm like, oh, they were never really that common, except that we've got that data that shows actually, 50 years ago, we should have been getting 100 odd of them. And so as each generation goes on, what's normal for them is going to be even less than what should be normal, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's all the egg trays. Now we fling the trap open wide, and then we've got these. These are adorable. So these are called yellowtails. And whenever I do a moth event, I always say, right, so if you annoy them, which I do tend to annoy moths quite a bit, they will stick their yellow tail up between their wings as a warning coloration, and it looks hilarious. But whenever I try and get them to do it, they never do it. But let's have a look. They're incredibly cute, fluffy white things.
They really are, yeah. They're, again, holding themselves like a tent.
Yeah.
He's almost thinking about it, that one.
Come on.
They've got big yellow antennae as well.
Yeah.
I can see. I saw a flash of it there.
Did you see it there?
Absolutely canary, like not even canary, sort of like an egg yolk yellow.
Yeah. And so it's just like they just curl that abdomen up, poke it up through their wings and go. It's almost like a flagpole. I'm toxic. I don't know if they are or not, but it's certainly that warning.
And they're almost pure white. So the contrast between that egg yolk yellow and the sort of hidden by the wings, it's so striking, isn't it?
Here's a little aside, just for you. One reason our 3 counties are a special place for wildlife. BCN Beauties.
Hello, my name is Chantal and I'm a Reserves Officer for the Wildlife Trust for Beds, Cambs and Northants. Nightingales travel around 3,000 miles from West Africa to breed in central and southern England, with the highest densities recorded in the southeast. In 2018, the British Trust for Ornithology recorded a 92% decline in the UK nightingale population since 1970. These declines have been driven by many factors, including development of land and the decline of traditional woodland management. Here at the Trust, we undertake habitat management work to keep our reserves in good condition for breeding nightingales, which nest surprisingly close to the ground. They require thickets of very dense scrub with a tightly packed canopy and thick protective edges full of brambles that cover all the way to the ground. An extremely dynamic and by its nature rapidly changing habitat that is also threatened by browsing deer and rabbits. Our trust was involved in experiments in the 2010s at our Grafham Water Nature Reserve to explore the effects of a new scrub management regime that involves a mixture of layering and coppicing, similar to that done to hedges, but involving the whole scrub tree. And this is now BTO's recommended way to manage sites for sustaining breeding nightingales. Male nightingales are extremely loyal to their breeding territories, so ensuring their preferred sites remain suitable is incredibly important. At Strawberry Hill, the Bedfordshire farm that was left over to nature over 35 years ago, we have recorded over 30 singing nightingales across the 150 hectare site. This represents a significant proportion of the entire Bedfordshire population, around half, and this is one of the things that makes this rewilded farm such an exciting project.
Yeah, we've moved to the second trap, which is in a more wooded area, just not too far from the other one, just up the way along a little path. But you're saying you don't often get that different species in this one compared to the other one, even though the habitat is slightly different.
No, not really. There are very subtle differences. Again, if it was analysed statistically, it probably wouldn't show as significant. But some definitely tend to prefer the one down there. So this is, and look at that face.
It's amazing.
So this is a black archers. And this is a male, so this is one of the few that is there's a posh word for it, but basically I can't remember what it is. The male is physically different to the female. So the females of these are much bigger, and their antennae aren't as fluffy. So the males generally have fluffier antennae because they use them to pick up the sex pheromones of the females. And from the species that I can tell which are male and which are female, generally it's mostly males that come to the traps. So I don't know if that's the same with all species of moth, but it kind of makes sense because the males generally sort of go in search of the females more than the females in search of the males, I think.
So they're out flying and roaming around.
I think so. And there are actually some... Oh, there he goes. There are actually some moths where the females don't even have wings anymore. They literally they're just the body with these little nubbins of where their wings used to be, and they will just sit on a tree and just wait for the males.
Just waft their pheromones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so extreme laziness. But yeah, so I think in the traps it's mostly males, but I can't be sure. But certainly where I can tell the difference, I think out of the black archers, I think I've seen about 3 females in the whole time. Really nice moth. And they're one of the bittersweet moths because they're doing really well. So obviously we're losing moths, but on the flip side we are gaining some new species, and they can kind of only put it down to climate change because they seem to sort of move in a sort of diagonal trajectory across from the southeast upwards. So we're losing moths that are moving further north. They're declining in this area, but they're still doing reasonably okay sort of further north. And then we've got species that are coming in off the continent that are sort of doing better as they're sort of progressing north as the climate's sort of changing and warming up.
And can they fly across oceans?
Yeah, so we do get some migrant moths. Quite a few common ones. So we get migrant large yellow underwings. So we've got the resident population, and then we get the numbers get boosted by migrants. Same with the silver Y. And then occasionally we get really exciting rare migrants that pop over. So same with your birds over in the sort of east and south coastlines, you get sort of like moth alerts for rare migrant moths and that sort of thing. And some of them are teeny tiny little micro moths, right up to great big hawk moths. I mean, my dream is to get a death's head hawk moth in the trap one day, but it's never happened yet. But that is the dream. But we did get convolvulus hawk moth, I think it was last year, which they're impressive. They're a migrant, and as big as the palm of your hand. Yeah, really impressive.
Yeah.
Oh, this delicate little thing. That's another new arrival. It's increasing year on year. So that's called a least carpet.
A least carpet?
A least carpet, yeah. So there's a group of moth called the carpets.
And does that mean they eat your carpets?
No, I think there's only about 3 species in the country that eat your carpets and your clothes. So the myth that moths will just eat my clothes is not. Well, it is true. There are some that will, but very, very few of them will. No, the carpets they're generally quite small and flat, and their markings are quite cryptic in the sense that look like Persian carpets. So that's where they got their name from. So I don't know why that's the least one. I think it's because it's so small and delicate. Not a very good example, but this one's called the spectacled moth.
So
if you look at it face on,
no, you can tell.
He has these big sort of biggles, aviator goggles on his face, and this sort of mohawk above his head.
It really does. It looks like a cartoon character. That's really good.
Oh, we've got another new one to the site. This was new this year. So this is a Kent black archers, which after 25 years of recording, we're still recording new species, but that's the sort of shift and change in the sort of ranges of species. So these are probably sort of moving in, probably from Kent. That might be why it's named that. Sort of, probably used to be confined to the east, and is now expanding as the climate changes. But yeah, again, a delicate little thing.
Yeah, it's
But
called Dark Arches. It's a bit, but it's very pale, that one. I
yeah,
suppose it's sort of mostly white with sort of pale grey-brown. I guess they are arches and they're dark against a white background, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. Some of the names you're like, not sure where you're going with that one, but I think there's a group that this belongs in that are called, there's the Least Black Archers, the Kent Black Archers, and another, can't remember, but yeah, so it's probably just sort of the name is linking it to that group of moths more than the actual archers. That's a good one here. This one's a good one.
Is it?
Yeah. So do you remember the wombles?
Yeah.
This is the womble.
Is it actually called that?
No,
Oh.
in my world it is. But it's amazing.
Oh, look.
Look at his little womble. He looks like a womble.
It does look like a womble. It's got a really long snout. A really long snout on a sort of orange buff coloured face. Oh, so fluffy.
Yeah.
So fluffy. And there's big antennae, again, with a male. I guess it's a male.
Yeah, so these are sexually dimorphic as well. And yeah, the females again are much bigger. And I think in the whole time I've seen probably 3 or 4 females in the whole time. So yeah, it's mostly males that we get in the trap.
Yeah.
And
Those big, look like combs.
yeah,
Antennae, sort of really delicate combs. And they're so big, they look like bunny ears.
Yeah.
It's it does look like a womble. I totally see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Or maybe a little weevil. It's got like a sort of weevil nose.
Yeah.
As well. Similar idea.
And those big eyes. So that nose is actually its palps, which are sensory organs. So yeah, this is called a drinker. It's not called the womble. It's called the drinker moth. I don't know why it's called a drinker moth. Yeah, these are actually declining on site. We used to get quite a few, 20 odd a year. Last few years, probably had about 5 to 10. So I get very excited when I see them. And these have, you quite often see their caterpillars, or used to, don't see them anywhere near as much now. Big, chunky, hairy caterpillars with sort of blue spots down the back, bluish spots. And in their final larval stage, they're sort of you just see them wandering across the grass, going to look for somewhere to pupate. And yeah, quite a common sight in the grass on a nice summer's day, but not so much anymore.
So yeah, I was wondering if you could just say why Pitsford? So why did someone think to put a moth trap on? You know, we manage over 100 reserves. Wildlife Trust of Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Northamptonshire. Bit of a mouthful, but yeah, over 100 reserves, and not every reserve has a moth trap.
Yeah.
In fact, I think isn't this the only one that does it daily, and certainly for the last 25 years.
Absolutely is, yeah. So yeah, I'm very lucky in that I just came onto this reserve after it was set up back in the 80s by someone called Cliff Christie, who I never got to meet, sadly, but sounds like it was a real character. And so when the nature reserve was set up with Anglian Water, so Anglian Water owned the land, and it was designated as a triple SI in the 70s, and Cliff Christie came along with the then, I think it was just Northamptonshire Wildlife Trust on our own then, and said this place is amazing for wildlife, let's protect it, and got so many people involved surveying the site to prove just how good it is for wildlife, and a lot of those volunteers that joined with Cliff back in the 80s still volunteer with me today, surveying everything from birds to bats to algae to bryophytes, moths. So yeah, that's how it came about. Pitsford is one of the most well monitored sites. We've got a species list of like over 4,000 species and that sort of thing. So someone came along with Cliff and said, "Oh, I'll set up some moth traps for you," and here they are. So I was very lucky to sort of inherit that, really.
Yeah, I wonder if they realised that 25 years on they'd still be trapping. You know, if that was hopefully that was the intention. But I mean, it is an amazing legacy, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, Phil, who built the traps, think he built them. He was certainly pivotal in starting them up back in '99. He's still in touch, so he knows that they're still going, and I still run into him occasionally at the Moth convention in Birmingham every year. Yes, such a thing exists. It's great fun. That's how it came about, really.
And to describe Pitsford, the nature reserve itself, we're standing here on the edge of a big lake. That's about as much as I can tell you. But I believe it goes all the way around the lake. Is that right?
There's a 7-mile walk all the way around, and obviously I'm slightly biased, but it is it's one of the nicest days out you can have, really, because it's so peaceful. So how it works is that you do need a permit to walk around, but members of the Wildlife Trust get the permit for free. You can go for a 7-mile walk around the lake, and there's 8 hides all the way around, benches looking out over the water, but also obviously it's a well-known birding site. That was what it's designated for. It's a triple SI for its breeding and wintering birds. But if you're like me and you like your insects and your smaller things, then the grasslands are absolutely full of beetles and butterflies and day-flying moths and night-flying moths, and so it's an incredible site. But even if you just you're not interested in identifying things, and you just want a day out in tranquil nature where you can get up close, you always get up close with muntjacs and buzzards and that sort of thing. They just stand in the path and stare at you because there's so low disturbance, because we don't allow dogs or bikes and that sort of thing. So you can quite often walk around the whole reserve and not see another person. It's so rare that you can get that still.
Yeah, and also with such a relatively long walk. I mean, a lot of our reserves are quite small, even if they're not small, there are smaller circuits that you can do within it. But because this one goes all the way around a lake,
that's it.
It's kind of 7 miles or nothing, I suppose.
That's it. Yeah. There's no shortcuts unless you want to swim.
Yeah,
which we don't recommend.
No, although there is an accessible hide here as well.
There is,
for wheelchairs.
Yeah.
Accessible.
Touch wood, we're due to upgrade it in the next year or so, hopefully funding allowing. So it's near the main lodge, and in front of it you've got tern rafts, you get kingfishers. The great egrets like to hang around there in the winter, so there's plenty to see, although you can't sort of get all the way around the reserve, sadly. We've got the accessible hide, which usually get some good sightings in front of, and in winter when we get smew, the smew tend to hang around in front of that hide, which is amazing.
And if members want to get a permit, they can't just show up as a member, do they? They have to actually contact us, don't they, to get a permit?
That's right. It's not sent out automatically. So what you do is when you get your membership, or if you're already a member and you want to get a permit, then you just drop Lisa Rowley or Northamptonshire at wildlifebcn.org an email with your membership number, and they'll pop it in the post for you. And and obviously I'm contactable if you need any information about the reserve at any point. And it's a nice office to have.
Yeah. And when you walk around, you will walk past the moth trap if you come here. It's quite visible here next to the path. And quite large. Doing amazing work, and and thanks to all the volunteers as well. I mean, we wouldn't be able to do what we do as a trust as a whole without the incredible work of volunteers, and that's been true since we started, I'm sure, and it continues to be true. But also to you, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for
coming over.
Yeah, and for the chat. It's been really, really good talking to you.
Thanks again to Mischa and to all the wonderful volunteers, past and present, at Pitsford Water Nature Reserve in Northamptonshire. And a huge thank you to James Williams and Jared Wentwick for the podcast music. You can see some pictures of a few of the moths taken on the day on our website at wildlifebcn.org/podcast, where you can also find details about how to book a place on our Introduction to Macro Photography Wildlife Training Workshop in 2025. with volunteer and photographer Dave Jackson, based at the reserve. If you're interested in visiting the reserve, please do email northamptonshire@wildlifebcn.org to register for a permit. As a member of the Wildlife Trust for Beds, Cams and Northants, you can get a permit for free, but you do still have to have one. It's a reserve that's well worth the effort. If you're not yet a member, please do consider joining. You can find out how to support our work looking after the wildlife and wild places of Beds, Cams and Northants at wildlifebcn.org/join. Every member makes a difference. And finally, do listen out for our next In Conservation podcast, released in December 2024, and let us know what you think by getting in touch on social media at WildlifeBCN or dropping us a line from the website. But for now, cheerio!